ancestors were sent to Australia as convicts. Actually on my mother's side, my great-great-great-grandfather, or there might be a few more greats in there, and he was sent over to Australia from England for the term of his natural life for drunken disorderly. 7 charges of drunken disorderly. So there were no rapists or murderers in the family. And to be honest with you, the family thinks it's hilarious. You know, we're quite proud of our ancestor. My parents did a really good job of raising us with the idea that things always had to be fair. So I was raised with this sense that everything needed to be equal. And then when I started to observe the world around me, I realised actually that wasn't the way things were. And particularly I saw women kind of getting the raw end of the deal. So as a kid, of course, you start speaking out about that. And my God, did it cause trouble. You know, even like, for example, I remember very distinctly with my grandparents, my grandfather would sit at the table. The pantry was right here. And he would say to my grandmother, who was at the other end of the table, I need the salt. The salt was right here. She would get up and go and get the salt for him. And I remember as a kid, you know, realising what was going on. And I said to him on this one day, I said, Pop, the salt's right there, get it yourself. And the family all went, because my grandfather was quite a strong man. To his credit, he laughed, and my grandmother thought it was fantastic. And he did. He got the salt on his own. Education to me represented my ticket out of not only my hometown, but also to a different life than what my parents had. You know, again, it's small town and they're working class people and they work their butts off. But it was tough. It was really tough economically. And I think from a very early age, I equated having a little bit more money with life being a little bit easier and certainly having more choices. So academia was my way out of there, and I had it in my mind that if I did well in school and got on to go to college, that I could not only leave back a smash, which wasn't really my place, and it also would put me on a trajectory with a career that would enable me to have a very different life. I think in my family initially, for sure, there was a feeling of being a little bit intimidated about the fact that I was getting an education. I mean, when you're the one getting the education, it's like big deal, you know. I mean, you're just at school and you're learning a lot of stuff. But I realise when I think about where they came from, you know, my mum finished school at 15 and my dad barely finished school and certainly was not very academic from his the way he talks about his academic career. I learned very early on, you know, that I needed to make sure I kind of didn't get a big head. So I've always been pretty reserved with what I talk about with the family, and I think that's filtered through. I mean, since I did my undergrad and even since I did my master's degree, like, we just don't talk about it.
Did we tell you the news?
No.
We got accepted.
No! You're kidding me.
Yes.
Oh my God, when did you find out?
About 4 days ago.
What?
Yeah.
So you find out you got a green card and you find out you're pregnant in the last 4 days?
I don't know, I knew I was pregnant about
Oh, okay.
2.5 months ago. You just found out. Yeah. Yeah.
That is fantastic.
Yeah, so we went to see our lawyer today and but oh gosh, we've got a list this long of all the documentation we have to get. But yes, so now officially, on official US stamp, Kingsley is an alien of extraordinary ability. So you can go.
Well done, babe. That's fantastic. How does that feel?
Oh, it's great. It's great because he can't work as a doctor,
Right.
as an attending unless he's a green card.
Exactly.
So it's not just staying here; it's the ability of working here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so fantastic.
It's a real relief.
So what does that do to your status then?
So I'm just the wife of an extraordinary alien.
Ta-da!
When I graduated from college, Melbourne Uni in Australia, Australia was going through a massive recession. So the unemployment rate at that time was like 13.5%. So I just graduated with a biochemistry degree. So the likelihood of getting a job in that economy was just crazy. It was so tough. At that time, I went out and I applied for, I can't remember how many jobs, just, waitressing, bartending, and it was crazy. I was just getting turned down left, right and centre. So a friend of mine who was studying Japanese at Melbourne Uni told me that they were interviewing students, really, who were studying the language Japanese to come out to Japan to be golf caddies. So I went and had this interview and kind of made out that I knew a lot more about golf than I actually did, and was accepted, got the position, and flew out within about 6 weeks of getting the job.
When I arrived in Japan, I had had 6 weeks of language studies, and I was so overwhelmed, quite frankly, that I couldn't remember the difference between hello and thank you. Those words are quite similar, domo and dozo. So I remember thinking, oh my God, I don't know how this is going to go. What was really humbling, and to be honest with you, really stressful, is that I was illiterate in Japan. You can't read any of the signs, you can't understand anyone unless you speak the language. Going to even the ATM cash machine, everything is in Chinese characters. So everything that I wanted to do as an independent adult, I needed help with. I would copy down the characters, on the cash machine, because that was pretty important to know how to get cash out of how to be cash machine, and I would match the characters. Growing up in Australia, I would often hear people complain about our immigrants, that they didn't speak English and they shouldn't be here if they can't speak the native language, etc. So it really helped me to empathise a great deal with just how difficult it is, A, being in a country when you don't speak the language and how isolating that can be, and B, how difficult it is to learn a second language. There were a lot of work opportunities in Japan, and one of those was teaching English. And you could make a crazy amount of money as a new college grad. So that's what I did. So I finished up with the golf caddy business up in the country and went down to the city and got a job there as an English language teacher. Guys, I want to share something with you. Okay, I'm a little bit nervous actually. I'm actually shaking. This is something that is connected to my life in Australia. So I left Australia when I was 21. I'm now almost 41, so I've lived overseas for 20 years, half my life. My grandmother gave me this when I was 21 and jumping on my plane to fly to Japan, where I would live for 8 years. And so I have had a very special connection with my grandmother. She was probably my rock in my life as a young girl growing up, when my parents were kind of doing their thing and being a bit crazy. She was the one I would go to. So she's very, very special to me. So when I left to go to Japan, I'm not religious at all, but my grandmother, she goes to church every Sunday. So she gave me, which I think was incredibly special, her own rosary beads. It's amazing actually holding these.
Yeah,
I
you
can
feel that
the connection.
have a piece of
That's right.
with you.
Right. And I didn't know it at the time, because when she gave them to me, I was like, okay, rosary beads.
What am I going to do with this?
I'm not going to be praying over there, Dad, But it's something that she cherished. Yeah. And what I didn't know at the time is that when she gave them to me, when I opened it up once I arrived in Japan, she had put a letter in there, a little note. I haven't read this letter for maybe 10 years. So I was going to read it this morning, and then I thought I'd like to just wait until I got here and read it with you guys, if that's okay. So I'm shaking because my grandmother passed away a few years ago, so it's kind of like hearing her words, Is it okay if I share it with you?
Yes.
Oh my God. Okay, so here we go. Okay. My dear Melainie, just a small gift to help you on your way. Thank you for the beautifully worded card, which I appreciated. Have a great time, and I'll be thinking of you every day until you come back. All our love, Nana and Pop. Obviously, my grandfather was still alive then. Love you lots. Wow, just seeing her writing. And you know what? She wrote me a letter every single week when I was in Japan. Wow. Yeah, for 8 years. Uh-huh. So I have this stack of all of her letters. Yeah. And then just before she passed away, she wrote me a letter. And Then I found out that she had passed away, and I flew home for her funeral. And after the funeral, I went back to Japan, and her letter was there waiting, and I couldn't open it. And I didn't open it for about 6 months. I just left it on the table because I knew when I opened it and I read it, that was it. That was the last letter. I got my degree in clinical nutrition when I first came to the States. That was the main reason actually for me to come over, is to study here at NYU. At the time before I came out, I was still living in Japan. So I wanted to continue on with my studies in clinical nutrition. And the decision was, do I go to London or do I go back home to Australia? And at that time, I decided to come out here to New York and check it out. And I love the campus. I love the people there. And I just thought, this is it. This is where I want to go and do my master's. After living in New York and experiencing life here, I really don't feel that Australia is the right fit for me. When I go back to Melbourne, I love it, but I know it. It's so familiar. And I feel that what really inspires me, or what I really love about life, is being someplace where I can make a living, I can, have a great life. But it's also a bit challenging because it's not my comfort zone. It's something that's slightly different, or actually in the case of Japan, very, very different. And so therefore I'm constantly learning new things. That's the kind of environment that I love. Even though we speak English, the Australian accent is a little bit tricky here in the States. And I have to say, the first year or so, I was kind of mocked at times, where people would be like, what? So you learn very quickly though, don't you? So you learn how to modify some of the syllables and, pronounce something with a little bit more of whatever edge that you need to. So the irony of that is that even though I feel now I'm probably better understood, people still think that I have a very strong Australian accent. And then my family think that I've got an American accent. So it's kind of like, whatever. My migration's been tough on my family in general, I think, mostly on my mum. My dad has actually embraced it in many ways, and he said to me, just keep going, stay as long as you can overseas. I know on the other hand, though, he is at a time in his life where he would also like his kids to be closer, so I think there's that duality to it for him. My mum has said to me that she thinks I don't have an identity because I, lived in Japan for 8 years. I was born in Australia. I've lived here for 10 years. So her question is really, who am I? Which, to be honest with you, was very hurtful because I embrace the fact that I'm Australian. Like, I know I'm Australian. I love that about my existence. But for me, it's not mutually exclusive that if just because you live somewhere else, that therefore you lose your identity of where you came from. After I graduated here at NYU, I worked for a couple of different places initially. I had like 3 part-time jobs as I was gaining more clinical experience. And then I went out on my own to start my own private practice. And I have to tell you, fear is a great motivator because I went from, having a reasonable amount of income coming in to quitting all my jobs and going basically cold turkey. So no income whatsoever. And I just had to build my practice. In the first 6 months, I reached out to about 100 professionals, and about 75 of those people called me back. And eventually, with playing phone tag and whatever, about 50 I was able to meet with face to face. Then within 12 months of that, I needed to hire someone else to come into my private practice. It was that crazy. I wanted to talk to you about a project for the summer. Jen, I just sent you an email. Do you mind pulling that up? Mm-hmm. It's about, how we're thinking of getting an IDAP chapter started here in New York City. Mm-hmm. So what we're wanting to do is get together with Immigrants and pull a whole heap of our referral people together, some of the clinicians here in the city, to kind of just have a kick-off gathering. Here at Melainie Rogers Nutrition, all of the staff are female, and personally something that I've wanted to do in my professional life is to create an environment, a work environment and a work culture that is really supportive of women. I've worked in other industries before, and you know, there's the glass ceiling, and there's a lot of different barriers to women being able to pursue their careers and earn the kind of money that they're entitled to. So one of my objectives here within my business is to really create an environment that is very supportive, very empowering, where we reimburse women at the rate that they should be reimbursed.
I started working with Melainie Rogers Nutrition because I really enjoyed the way that she treated her clients. She had such an open heart towards them. She didn't just see them as somebody who walked in the door and she was looking to get a paycheck from them and push them on. She really cared and had deep levels with them. I call it, for lack of better words, food therapy, because you're not just going ahead and giving somebody a diet. She knows very deeply all the things that are going on with them, just by the way that they walk in the door, the way that their body language is.
When I was in my 20s, actually, I myself suffered with anorexia for about 5-6 years. And at that time, it's funny, you know, because it never occurred to me at that time or after I recovered that I would go on and work with eating disorders. And it wasn't until I got here, I was working with people who had binge eating disorder and compulsive overeating, and it was at that point where I realised my own experience of having suffered with an eating disorder was really valuable in my understanding what they were going through, because that's a big factor with our eating disorder clients, is that they feel so isolated that no one else can possibly get it, because you know it's a pretty torturous existence. And without them actually knowing that I have had an eating disorder, I understood where they were at, so I could really help with, you know, challenging those beliefs and helping them through their recovery process. I am thrilled to say that I've made a huge decision, probably one of the biggest decisions in my life, to become a single mum. And this has taken me years of consideration to get to this point. So my decision to become a single mother really came from the fact of, I hate to say it, but there's a biological clock. I was also previously in a relationship, in a marriage, and we were planning a family at that time. And when the marriage fell apart, I felt that my chances of being a mum also disappeared at the same time. And then it took me a year or two to realise that I actually could do this on my own.
And then you and I were talking about we're going to be pushing our carriages together.
Yeah, Jill and I. Well, actually, Kingsley will have to include Desi on this.
Yes,
Jill
that's
and I are hoping that we'll be new mothers about the same time, and same with Desi. Yeah. And you too, Sharon. You'll be a little bit ahead of us.
I can give my stuff to somebody.
So we can have mum and bubs groups here. Yeah. Right. I'll just provide the wine.
Provide the babysitting.
It's an essential piece, isn't it? That's what my sister says in Australia they do. They sit around so they can have a glass of wine and the kids are... I'm the only member of my family here in the States, so my kids won't have even the access to their aunts and uncles that I did. But, you know, I thought a lot about it, and I do believe in a chosen family, like kind of you can create your own family, and living abroad you have to, you know, like when you don't have your family around, your friends take on a heightened role. Your friendships really do, because your friends actually end up doing a lot of things for you that family members would normally do. Like when you need to move apartments, it's your friends who are there rather than your dad with your pickup truck or whatever. And as I contemplate becoming a mother myself, I'm acutely aware that I want my child to have a sense of community, and that I'm going to need to create that. I wonder what it's going to be like. I even think about identity. I have an Australian accent of sorts, and I'm Australian. And if my child has an American accent, which surely they will, does that mean that their identity is American? Or if I teach them to speak with an Australian accent, does that mean that they're more Australian? You know what I mean? Like philosophically, they're kind of interesting questions to ask. At the end of the day, my goal is for my child to be happy no matter where we're living, and that I will embrace every aspect of the cultural norms here that raising a child entails.